After years of a seemingly perfect marriage, Thomas found his world shattering when he discovered his wife, Emma, had been unfaithful. The betrayal hit him like a thunderstorm, relentless and loud, leaving him breathless and uncertain of how to move forward. He confronted her one evening, his voice shaky, his hands clenched in fury. Emma didn't deny it. She sat there, tears streaking her face, apologizing over and over again for the affair that had lasted almost a year. Thomas was heartbroken. The love they had built together, the children they had raised, all felt like a lie. The trust they shared, once unbreakable, now seemed impossible to rebuild. But despite his anger, he couldn't walk away. He spent nights pacing, lost in thought, trying to reconcile the deep pain with the love that still lingered for Emma. He couldn't make sense of it, but something inside him whispered that the woman he had married, the woman he had shared his life with, deserved a chance. In the days that followed, Emma pleaded for forgiveness. She explained how she had been lonely, feeling emotionally abandoned as Thomas had become consumed by work, distant and preoccupied. Emma had made a choice she now regretted deeply, but the damage was done. Still, Thomas couldn't quite bring himself to leave. He had witnessed Emma's remorse firsthand, and while he didn't excuse what she had done, he could see the raw pain in her eyes, the genuine longing to repair the relationship. Slowly, they began to rebuild, though the road was rocky. Every glance, every touch, felt like a reminder of the betrayal, but they tried. They attended therapy, communicated openly, and faced the uncomfortable truths of their marriage. Some days, Thomas felt resentment bubble to the surface, the wounds fresh and unhealed. On others, he saw glimpses of the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who was still there beneath the mistakes. Over time, the decision to forgive Emma became less about her and more about him. It wasn't an easy choice, nor a clean one, but he made it. For his peace. For their family. Slowly, trust was built again, not as it was before, but differently. The scars remained, reminders of the storm they had weathered. But with time, they learned to navigate their new reality, imperfect, but still standing together. Thomas forgave Emma, not because he didn't hurt, but because he understood that sometimes love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay and fight, even when the pain seemed unbearable. And so, they stayed, side by side, imperfect and real. As the months passed, the weight of the past still hung between them, though it was no longer a constant presence. Thomas found himself questioning the future more than once. Was forgiveness truly enough to move forward? Could their marriage survive the aftermath of such betrayal, or would the cracks widen with time? Emma, for her part, worked tirelessly to rebuild the trust that she had shattered. She became more attentive, more present, trying to make up for the distance she had allowed to grow between them before the affair. But there were days when Thomas would catch himself wondering if this was truly their fresh start, or merely a facade built on guilt and fear. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of their home, their children asleep upstairs, Thomas looked over at Emma. Her face was still so familiar, but now there was an undercurrent of something else, a fragility, a self-awareness that hadn't been there before. She had changed. Not just in the way she behaved, but in the way she seemed to see the world. Maybe it was the realization of what she had almost lost, or the realization that love and trust weren't easily given back once they had been taken. "I don't want to keep pretending," Thomas said quietly, his voice breaking the silence. He wasn't sure what he was about to say, only that it needed to be said. "I don't want to act like everything's fine when it's not. There's still so much between us." Emma looked at him, her eyes wide with worry, but she didn't interrupt. He continued, gathering his thoughts. "I've been trying so hard to forgive you. And I think I have, but some days, it feels like I'm still standing in the shadow of what you did. And I hate it. I hate feeling like I'm still stuck there." She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his. "I don't want you to feel that way, Thomas. I never wanted you to feel like you were trapped in the past because of me. I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm not that person anymore." There was sincerity in her voice, but Thomas wasn't sure if that was enough anymore. Could he truly let go of the pain? Could he find peace in knowing that she had hurt him but was now trying so hard to make things right? They spent the next few months having difficult conversations, not just about the affair, but about their individual needs and the ways they had let each other down over the years. Thomas had realized that while Emma's infidelity was the most obvious betrayal, it wasn't the only issue in their marriage. There had been a lack of emotional intimacy, a growing distance that neither of them had fully acknowledged. In a way, the affair had been a wake-up call, forcing them to confront the cracks in their relationship that they had previously ignored. One evening, Thomas and Emma sat in the living room after a long day of talking and working through the mess they had created. They had shared tears, apologies, and promises. As Thomas looked at Emma, he realized something profound. He wasn't just forgiving her for the affair anymore. He was forgiving himself for the resentment he had carried for so long. He was forgiving himself for staying in a relationship that had been broken long before the affair ever happened. "Maybe we both needed to learn something," Thomas said softly. "About ourselves. About each other." Emma nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I've learned more than I ever thought I could. I don't expect things to be perfect, but I promise you I'll keep fighting for us." And so, they did. They fought. Not in the sense of arguing, but in the sense of putting in the work to heal, to grow, and to be better for each other. They began to find joy in the little things again, cooking together, taking walks, rediscovering shared interests. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when doubt crept in, but over time, the wounds began to scar. The trust wasn't fully restored, and perhaps it never would be, but it was different now. They no longer stood in the shadow of what had happened, but instead, they learned to walk beside it, acknowledging it without letting it define them. It was a marriage born from the ashes of betrayal, but somehow, it was still alive. They had both chosen to stay, not because they were afraid of being alone, but because they still believed in the love that had once united them. And even though the scars remained, they no longer felt like a reminder of failure, but rather a testament to their strength and their willingness to rebuild together. As time continued to pass, the rawness of the past began to fade, replaced by a new rhythm in their relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Emma and Thomas learned to embrace the imperfections of their journey, both individually and as a couple. There were still moments of tension, a fleeting look, a word unsaid, that reminded them of the betrayal, but they no longer let those moments define them. They had made a conscious decision to move forward, not by forgetting the past, but by accepting it as a part of who they were now. One Saturday afternoon, they decided to take a trip to the lake where they had spent their first summer together as a married couple. It was a place that held so many memories, a place that had once been filled with laughter, love, and promises. Now, it felt like the perfect place to confront the past and find peace in it. They didn't speak much as they walked along the shore, their feet crunching in the gravel beneath them. The air was still, the water calm, and it felt as though the world was holding its breath. Emma stopped and turned to Thomas. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been if none of this had happened?" she asked, her voice tinged with sadness. Thomas paused, his gaze drifting across the water. "I think about it sometimes. But if I'm being honest, I don't know if I would change anything. I don't know if we would have had the chance to really fix things if it hadn't happened." Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, they weren't just tears of regret. They were tears of acceptance. "I've learned so much from my mistakes. From what I did to you, to us. I'm not proud of what happened, but I can't go back. All I can do is make sure it never happens again." Thomas took her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "I know you won't. And I know I've got my own work to do, too. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. It's something we have to keep choosing every day. I choose you, Emma. I choose us." She smiled through her tears, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the weight of the past had truly lifted. They were standing in front of a future, uncertain but full of potential. The cracks in their relationship would always be there, but they no longer felt like obstacles. They were simply part of their story, a story of growth, of forgiveness, and of rebuilding what had been broken. As they sat by the water that day, the sun dipping low in the sky, they talked about their hopes, their dreams, and the life they still wanted to build together. They made plans for the future, not just for the big moments, but for the small ones too. The quiet evenings at home, the morning walks, the shared laughter. They knew that life wasn't perfect, but in each other, they found a reason to keep trying. Thomas knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would still be moments of doubt, moments when the memories of betrayal would threaten to resurface. But he also knew that he had made the choice to forgive, to stay. And in doing so, he had chosen to let go of the past and embrace the possibility of a future built on trust, love, and commitment. When they finally left the lake that evening, hand in hand, it felt like a new beginning. Their marriage wasn't the same as it had been before, and perhaps it never would be. But that was okay. They had come through the storm together, and now they were stronger for it. They were not defined by the betrayal, but by the choice they had made to heal and move forward. And as they looked ahead, they knew that no matter what came next, they had already proved that love, forgiveness, and resilience were more powerful than anything that could tear them apart. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. The initial tension had given way to a quieter, steadier bond. Though the memory of the affair never fully disappeared, it no longer haunted their daily lives. Instead, it became a chapter in their shared history, one they acknowledged but didn't allow to dominate their present. They had both learned to navigate the delicate dance between remembering the hurt and choosing not to live in it. Thomas found himself growing more patient, more understanding with Emma. There were still days when the weight of what had happened lingered in the back of his mind, but he had grown better at letting those thoughts pass without letting them consume him. He realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about giving space to both the good and the painful moments and choosing to make new memories that could stand on their own. Emma, too, continued her work of self-reflection. She knew that the affair had been a symptom of deeper issues, not just in their marriage, but within herself. She had been searching for validation and connection in the wrong places, something she had never fully acknowledged until she faced the consequences of her actions. She had learned to open up to Thomas in ways she hadn't before, and to ask for what she needed without expecting him to read her mind. In therapy, both individually and as a couple, they had begun to heal not just the wounds from the affair, but the deeper scars that had formed over years of unspoken needs and unaddressed fears. One evening, as they sat together on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set behind the trees, Emma turned to Thomas with a quiet question. "Do you ever wonder if we'll ever be that couple again?" Her voice was soft, vulnerable. Thomas looked at her thoughtfully, his fingers tracing the edge of his glass. "What do you mean?" he asked, unsure of where the conversation was heading. "The couple we were before all of this," she said, her gaze distant as if she was searching for something. "The one who didn't have to think so much. The one who loved each other without so many layers of hurt." Thomas smiled gently, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I don't think we'll ever be that couple. But maybe that's not such a bad thing." Emma turned toward him, brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" "We're not that couple anymore because we've changed," Thomas said. "And I think that's what matters. We've been through something difficult, and we're still standing here, still choosing each other. We might not be the carefree people we were back then, but we're stronger now. We understand each other in ways we never did before. We've learned how to love each other, not just in the easy times, but through the hardest ones." Emma's eyes softened, and she felt a tear slip down her cheek, though this time, it wasn't from sorrow. It was from a sense of peace, of acceptance. "I'm so sorry, Thomas." "For everything." He reached over and gently wiped the tear from her cheek, his touch tender. "I know you are. And I'm sorry too. For the ways I shut myself off from you, for not being present when you needed me. But we're here now. We've learned so much about each other." They sat in silence for a moment, the world around them quiet, the air cool with the fading light. It was a moment of contentment, of reflection. They weren't the same couple they had been when they first met, but they had built something new, something more resilient. Months turned into years, and their marriage continued to grow. They took trips together, laughed about old memories, and made new ones. They worked through challenges, both big and small, and came out the other side more connected. There were still moments when the shadows of the past crept in, a tense silence, a fleeting look, but they had learned how to weather those storms. They had learned to face the past without letting it dictate their future. One evening, while celebrating their anniversary, Thomas pulled out a small box from his pocket. It wasn't a grand gesture, but in that quiet moment, it felt like the most meaningful one. He opened the box to reveal a simple, delicate ring, one that matched the one he had given her years ago, before the affair. He looked at Emma, his eyes full of warmth. "I don't know if I ever properly gave you a second chance," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I'm choosing you again. Every day." Emma, her heart full of love and gratitude, looked down at the ring, then back up at him. "And I'm choosing you," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "For all that you are. For all that we've been through. I love you more now than I ever thought possible." They embraced, and in that moment, it wasn't about forgetting or even forgiving. It was about understanding that love, real love, is a choice made over and over again, even in the face of imperfection. They had chosen each other, time and time again, through the mess and the healing, through the mistakes and the growth. They were no longer just a couple who had been through a betrayal. They were a couple who had chosen to stay, to rebuild, to love deeply despite everything. And that, in the end, was more than enough.